Hello, and welcome to Legal Management Talk. I'm your host, Justin Eskenazi. So I'm joined today by three fantastic guests and experts in the business development field. Peter Johnson is a former managing partner and founder of Law Practice Consultants. He helps law firms with compensation structuring and business development training and coaching. Ioana Good and Adrien are the founders of Find a Rainmaker, which is an online tool that helps firm leaders, find business developers and rainmakers. So Ioana is a former journalist, which is close to my heart because I am as well. And Adrien has helped hundreds of companies with strategic marketing and branding initiatives. Welcome, all of you. Great to have you on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks.
So, I know business development is such an important topic in law firm business nowadays. And so I understand that there's a bunch of behavioral traits that kind of define what makes a good business developer. And, I'm curious if you could describe kind of what some of those are and what is kind of the latest tools that are being used to, really kind of pinpoint those to a person.
Ioana, did you want to jump in or you want me to go?
I was thinking Peter, go ahead.
Okay, it's on me. Well, I think, Justin, that's a really good question. I think there's a lot of components to really great business development, and that comes in forms of teams. A lot of times, you have a great networker, but they need that closer to actually close the deal. There's analysts out there that are just wonderful at these niche topics, and they do the work behind the scenes, but they're equally important in that dynamic sales team. There's collaborators that come up with great business solutions. So the question is finding what your strength is. So there's a lot of tools out there and assessments that would help give you a leg up on that information. It provides great strategy when you're sending a group to a conference, for example. We know oftentimes firms invest a lot of time, aka billable hours, and financial commitments to sending people to conferences. So knowing that information up front to better pick who to send to those conferences is really helpful. I know that when you're putting together those teams, it's also helpful to know what everybody's strength is so that you can tailor a great business development coaching and training program, which I know Peter will be able to talk about more in depth. So that's really important nowadays in this landscape because time is such a commodity, right? So we really want to be strategic about our business development efforts.
Yeah, and that effort and the initiatives, business development has become so much more sophisticated over the years. If we go back many years ago, business development was not an issue because back then there were so many clients it didn't make much difference, and now there are more lawyers and fewer clients, and so there's a lot more competition. The other is that no one went to law school to learn how to sell. In fact, people went to law school to avoid selling. They didn't want to be in insurance or in some other sales position, so that's why it was a safe haven to go to law school. In order to achieve success, in order to achieve independence and autonomy in a law firm now, you need to have business and you need to know how to get business. And I'm fond of saying, and Ioana and Adrien have heard me say this, the capacity for self-deception is limitless. What people see themselves as a business developer is not what we see, but more importantly, what these various tools allow us to see in greater detail to assist the firm and assist the individual in not going and taking a smorgasbord of business development activities, but knowing exactly what should be on their business development diet
And I would just like to say, we recently spoke with one of our clients, and they're a large law firm with multiple offices across the United States. And they said to us, we spent $50,000 bringing 20 attorneys to a conference. And unfortunately, we didn't get much out of it. What do you think? So, we thought about that, and we thought, well, it doesn't mean you have to send so many people. It's more important that you send the right people. So if you send 5 that are naturally gifted at networking, business development, closing, I bet those people are going to come back with a lot more leads and a lot more business than an army of people who really are not naturally gifted at that. So using biodata, and to Peter's good point, a shortcut to identifying the right people is really important as law firms, continue to grow and generate revenue and grow in the market space.
Ioana has a great point in terms of these conferences, because the easy thing to do is send these people a conference, give them a gift, and send them to a conference and just tell them to network.
Right.
Well, 50% of the time, people stay in their room because they don't like networking and don't know how to do it. So finding the people that are good at that and investing less dollars to create more potential is just such a benefit to a law firm, having that knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was going to say one more thing to add on to that. A lot of times, sometimes you'll send a group of people that are great networkers to a conference. And of course, that's great because they're there to shake the hands, build the relationship. But a networker is not always a closer. So you also have to put that person in position to maybe do the dinners to close the deal, or do the follow-up after the networker type has opened that door. So that biodata, to Ioana's point, is super helpful and insightful.
I mean, it helps in putting together a plan. And what are your objectives in going to a networking event? Generally, the goal is not to close business at that networking event. The goal is to create clear next steps that lead to closing a business. So if you know that somebody is a networker but not a closer, then he or she can make the relationship, and their next job is to make an introduction, and their job is pretty much done. But unless the person knows what the expectation is, he or she thinks they got to go to collect business cards and close the sale. Otherwise, they're not successful.
Right. See, we can talk about this all day, Justin.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
You just mentioned, setting expectations, and, what are some of the best ways that you found that, administrators have been able to clearly communicate those roles? Because like you said, Peter, most people don't go to law school to sell. So this is something that, is really probably unnatural for a lot of people. So to be able to explain these roles to your lawyers, I'm sure, is something that a lot of administrators are struggling to come up with a good way.
So I'm going to answer, I guess, a little bit as a politician, because I'm going to give you an answer. I'm not so sure it's responsive, but a lot of these administrators, and I don't mean to be pejorative, or people in business development, or people making the determination who will prosper and thrive, in a business development coaching program or workshop, they're working on anecdotal information. They're working on what they think, as opposed to data that can be provided to them that probably will change their idea of what the successful candidate, the characteristics he or she has, as opposed to what they think they have. So I'm not so sure that's responsive, but
well, one of the things I want to point out also is the importance of team formation, right? So when you have too many closers on the team, it's not going to work out so well because everybody is wanting to compete against each other, perhaps talk over each other, get work over each other. So a much more diverse team makeup is very important. So for instance, if you have an analyst, you know, a networker, a closer, a media spokesperson, creative collaborator, all of these things, we all have different gifts. And when we bring everybody together, the growth is immense for law firms. So I would tell the legal administrators to really look at their teams. And especially if they're developing new teams, new practice groups, and so on, there's so much going on these days. You know, use their judgment and base their judgment on data to form those things. And then based on that, you can bring in the appropriate training. So you can bring in Peter, you know, to do the training for business development. You can bring in someone else to do training for media training, and so on. So instead of having training firm-wide for everybody, one size fits all, we recommend really looking at the people that you have, the teams that you have, and spending the time and dollars to invest in that training.
Yeah, that's a great point. Go ahead, Adrien.
I was going to say, and that really helps narrow in on creating that list of expectations for the attorney. When you know what makes them tick, and then you have a tailored program, perhaps working with Peter and, to Ioana's point, some other components, you'll be able to set those expectations for them so they know what they need to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. And much of coaching is one-on-one coaching. Yes, you have workshops, et cetera. But I think this really helps me in the one-on-one coaching because generally what I do is I have a standard survey that I will send out that helps me think about what types these folks may be and how I can be helpful to them. And I also rely on people in the firm, with their administrators, with their business development people, to give me some assistance so that I get a profile of the person with whom I'm working. If I had this type of information in advance, it would really, we use the word shortcut, it would really shortcut some of the learning and time it takes to uncover what I can be shown in data in a relatively short period of time. And then most of my research is limited to validation as opposed to learning the traits through my conversations and surveys.
Right. And when it comes to coaching, what do you say to the attorney who goes, oh, well, I can do all of that? You know, even after this data has been collected and their, you know, type of developer has been identified, they say, oh, you know, I can do any of those roles. So how do you?
What do I say? My glib response is, you can probably do everything I said, but what do you do, and how successful have you been doing it?
So then, as an administrator, how do you then ensure that they know their role and can then hone that to be as effective as possible?
Well, I'm going to let them respond, but I'm just going to make a preliminary comment. For me, coaching only works if somebody really wants to do business development. It's not a remedial program. This is for people who want to succeed but can't figure out what gets in the way. So if they do pushback, guess what? Coaching is not for everybody. And it sounds like you're okay, and we'll go and work with people who, I wouldn't say this, but really want it and taste it, but just can't figure it out.
Yeah, and to add to that, I would say from a business perspective, you have to take the politics out of it and do what's best for the business. If your idea is you want to grow, you know, the firm, and you want to stand out from your competitors, then you have to make some serious decisions. So you can't, you know, just adjust based on what everybody's response is.
And I also want to touch on the idea that I think large firms, medium-sized firms, and small firms, it all can look at this in a different way in terms of the resources they have and the staff size and all of that. So for each size firm, how is it? What have you found are the different ways that are most effective? To helping each firm understand how to best go about this.
Well, from a technology standpoint, I think it's similar across the board, because whether you're a small firm with limited resources or a large firm, time is of essence, right? So technology and getting that bio data and those answers to then strategize and move forward, I think is really valuable on all levels. And so I think that that's very similar across the board. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, and I would say the coaching is the same. It's just a smaller firm, smaller pool of attorneys with whom you work, and larger firm. They probably have greater financial resources and have more attorneys that go through the coaching program. I mean, there's some firms, quite frankly, that can't afford the coaching.
We have seen some great success with smaller firms as well, because they are laser focused with on their finances and wanting to make sound decisions, and they're able to make different decisions than they would in a larger law firm where you have committees and buy-in and all of that. And the best part is that you can really look at some of these behavioral traits. We look at 21 behavioral traits. So we look at these, and then we can identify not only what the challenges are, but but what the opportunities are. So based on that, to Peter's great point, if you have all of this data internally, you can do your own training if you want to. If you want to go the added step and pay for additional training, then that's great. But if not, you have all of the information. People come and go. You can always keep it. The information doesn't change. So as you're bringing on new people to a team, you can say, okay, we have too many analytical people in this team. We're going to shift the team so that this analytical person can go to e-discovery and this analytical person could go to labor and employment or whatever it is. So really just making those sound decisions based on data and internal and external training.
Yeah. Similar across the board for sure.
Gotcha. And I think you alluded to this, but not even in terms of team building, but in terms of hiring in the first place, how effective can these tools and this technology be in terms of helping hiring managers make those decisions?
That didn't even occur to me, and that is a great point. Recruiting is a challenge for everybody. Mm-hmm. It is recruiting, and I'll talk about retention too. But you got to recruit before you retain. And a lot of times, law firms are looking for the same people. They're looking, obviously, they're going to be very bright, articulate, and have developed the legal skills. And they have to have the personality that's congruent with the personality of the firm. You get that. But a lot of times they will say, a recruiter may say he or she actually has great business development potential, a lot of resource, a lot of clients, a lot of this, a lot of that. And too often law firms buy the futures. Okay. Mm-hmm. And particularly if it's a 3, 4, 5th, or 6th year where they really haven't matured in their business development skills and behaviors.
If you look at all the other disciplines that go on, marketing and legal work, I mean, everybody looks at analytics now. So looking at this bio data and having particular measurement tools is very important to our workforce moving forward.
Right. And on that point, moving forward, where do you see the business development expanding to, and how, what are to what extent should administrators be looking forward to kind of growing the business development field in addition to everything else they got going on?
I'll let them answer, but I'm going to ask them a question. What is more important to a law firm than being successful at bringing in business and retaining clients?
Yeah. Ioana, I'll let you jump in on that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's why we're having this discussion, is to ensure that we have the right people so that law firms can compete. It's a lot more difficult to hire great talent. There's many uses of this data. It's not only hiring, but it's also retreats. It's getting in front of the media and earning the thought leadership pieces and having the right people to do that. It's making sure you have enough people to analyze, your every move before you go out and you sell. So there's so many different components that it would be a huge mistake if law firms aren't looking at this, right? Because that's the way that they can remain competitive. Things are changing all the time. And COVID, frankly, was a disruptor. And so now there's another opportunity for everybody to shift. Okay, we're now working remotely. We're working from different locations. There's some people that are just naturally gifted and they can sell themselves into a job. But then you realize that they're really not good at their job. What do you do then? If you had biodata, then you would figure out, okay, these are their strengths. I'm going to put them in the right team. So there's so many ways to use this data and make informed decisions that I think it's a win-win for the administrators and for, people that are in the management side of law firms.
It saves them money.
Absolutely.
It saves, from the recruiting point, it saves them money. I mean, we all know, and your organization well knows and puts statistics together as to how much it costs for a bad hire.
Right.
This is a component that can really increase the chances that it's not a bad hire, or he or she is not a bad hire.
Right. And there's so many people that will say, oh, we need all this help. We need all this help. And then they hire an army of people, and that army of people can't get stuff done. But then if you hire the right 5 people, those 5 people are going to be able to do as much quality work as that army of people. So really, that's also helpful to think about.
Oh, for sure. Great. Well, thank you all very much for your time and being here. I think it's very exciting to see the kind of technology that is coming out and is going to be able to help firms do business better, and and weather all these kind of trying circumstances over the future. So thanks a lot for providing your insight, and I hope to be talking again to you soon.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. We enjoyed it.
Thanks so much to our viewers and subscribers for tuning in. If you want to hear more of Legal Management Talk, you can find us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, you can learn more about ALA at alanet.org. Until next time.